Welcome to this quiz on events that shaped history. In addition to being a fun quiz, I'd also like it to be an interesting learning experience. And therefore, I've put the questions in chronological order, starting with the earliest and coming up to around the 1990s, so that you can see when they happened relative to each other. So if you're ready, let's begin the quiz. Which ancient civilization developed the first known writing system, cuneiform? Was that the Olmecs, Sumerians, or Egyptians? That was the Sumerians. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt marked the beginning of which historical period? The late, middle, or early dynastic period? The correct one there, the early dynastic period. Which civilization was the first to use urban planning with grid-patterned streets and advanced drainage? Ancient China, Ancient Egyptian, or the Indus Valley civilization? That was the Indus Valley civilization. What was the first known empire to unite multiple city-states under one ruler? The Egyptian, Akkadian, or Babylonian Empire? That was the Akkadian Empire. Name the famous early law code remembered for the principle, an eye for an eye. Was that the Code of Hammurabi, Sargon, or Gilgamesh? That was the Code of Hammurabi. The Shang dynasty developed the earliest known form of Chinese writing. What did they first use to write on? Bamboo paper, clay tablets, or oracle bones? They used oracle bones. The widespread destruction of major cities across the Mediterranean and Middle East around 1200 BCE is known as what? The Iron Age, Bronze Age, or Copper Age collapse? That was the Bronze Age collapse. Which ancient civilization created a concise alphabet that became the basis for many modern alphabets? The Phoenicians, Babylonians, or Hittites? It was the Phoenicians. Which ancient people formed the first organized states in the southern Levant around 1000 BCE? The Babylonians, Egyptians, or Israelites? That was the Israelites. The period when the Greek alphabet and the city-states of ancient Greece developed is which? Archaic, Dark Age, or Bronze Age Greece? That is Archaic Greece. The fall of which empire in 612 BCE marked the end of the first great empire in Mesopotamia? Neo-Babylonian, Babylonian, or Neo-Assyrian Empire? The answer, Neo-Assyrian. Which Chinese philosopher founded a system of thought emphasizing ethics and proper conduct? Mozi, Confucius, or Han Fei? Correct choice there, Confucius. Which historical figure lived around the 5th century BCE and founded the movement that became Buddhism? Ashoka the Great, Siddhartha Gautama, or Vardhamana? The answer is Siddhartha Gautama. Who founded the Achaemenid Persian Empire that became the largest empire in the world up to that time? Xerxes, Darius I, or Cyrus the Great? That was Cyrus the Great. Cleisthenes' reforms that laid the foundations of democracy occurred in which city-state? Corinth, Sparta, or Athens? The answer is Athens. The battles of Marathon and Salamis were fought between Greek city-states and which empire? The Persian, Hittite, or Macedonian Empire? They were fought against the Persian Empire. What's the period after Alexander's conquests when Greek culture spread across the Middle East and Mediterranean? Minoan, Hellenistic, or Mycenaean era? That was the Hellenistic era. In which region was the Maurya Empire founded in 321 BCE? Ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, or India? That was in ancient India. Ashoka, the third Maurya ruler, is remembered for promoting which religion? Sikhism, Buddhism, or Hinduism? The answer, Buddhism. Who unified China in 221 BCE, becoming its first emperor? Ting Shi Huang, Han Wudi, or Liu Bang? The answer is Ting Shi Huang. The Han dynasty's most significant long-term impact on the world was which of these? Inventing the wheel, inventing gunpowder, or establishing the Silk Road? It was establishing the Silk Road. The establishment of the Roman Empire by Augustus marked the end of which period? Roman democracy, Roman Republic, or Roman Kingdom? It marked the end of the Roman Republic. Historically, which Roman emperor issued the decree for a census at the time of Jesus' birth? Nero, Tiberius, or Augustus? That was Augustus. In 70 CE, which city's second temple was destroyed by the Romans, marking a major historical turning point? Was that Jerusalem, Alexandria, or Damascus? That was Jerusalem. In 313, Roman Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing what? Slavery, gladiator games, or Christianity? The correct one there, Christianity. Which empire's golden age of India saw major advancements in many fields? The Maurya, Gupta, or Mughal Empire? That was the Gupta Empire. The founding of Constantinople under Constantine I marked a shift in power from which city? Alexandria, Carthage, or Rome? The answer, Rome. The overthrow of which ruler is recognised as marking the fall of the Western Roman Empire? Romulus Augustulus, Commodus, or Julius Caesar? That was Romulus Augustulus. The fall of the Western Roman Empire is historically significant for marking the beginning of which period? Classical Antiquity, Renaissance, or Early Middle Ages? That is, the Early Middle Ages. The Hijra was a pivotal migration event where Muhammad and his followers moved from Mecca to where? Damascus, Jerusalem, or Medina? The answer is Medina. In the 7th century CE, early Arab Muslim conquests created large states called what? Empires, caliphates, or kingdoms? The correct answer is caliphates. Which battle is recognised for halting Islamic expansion into Europe, a significant turning point in European history? The Battle of Tours, Varna, or Vienna? That was the Battle of Tours. Which city was founded in 762 and became the centre of the Islamic Golden Age? Palmyra, Riyadh, or Baghdad? That was Baghdad. The Viking Age is generally considered to have begun with a raid on which location in 793? Edinburgh, York, or Lindisfarne? That was a raid on Lindisfarne. The crowning of Charlemagne in 800 CE influenced the development of which European institution? The Ottoman, Holy Roman, or Byzantine Empire? The answer, the Holy Roman Empire. The Kingdom of Ghana was historically significant for its control of which major trade resource? Gold, diamonds, or ivory? The answer is gold. Name the Norse explorer often credited with being the first European to set foot in North America? Bjorn Ironside, Eric the Red, or Leif Erikson? The answer is Leif Erikson. Which event in 1066 reshaped English society and medieval politics? The Norman Conquest, the 100 Years' War, or the Magna Carta? That was the Norman Conquest. What series of military campaigns began in 1096 under the request of Pope Urban II? The Reconquista, the Inquisition, or the First Crusade? The answer is the First Crusade. The empire founded by Genghis Khan in 1206 became the largest what in history? Maritime empire, contiguous land empire, or religious empire? The answer, contiguous land empire. The Magna Carta is historically significant for limiting the powers of what authority? The monarchy, the government, or the church? The answer is the monarchy. The Mali Empire controlled important trade routes connecting which two regions generating great wealth? North Africa and Europe, South Africa and Arabia, or West and North Africa? It connected West and North Africa. Which city was sacked by the Mongols in 1258, marking the end of a significant period in Islamic history? Cairo, Baghdad, or Damascus? That was Baghdad. Against which empire did Osman I expand his territories when founding the Ottoman Empire around 1299? The Holy Roman, Mongol, or Byzantine Empire? That was the Byzantine or Byzantine. Between 1347 and 51, the Black Death killed what estimated percentage of Europe's population? 30 to 50, 10 to 20, or 5 to 10? It killed 30 to 50%. Who invented the movable type printing press, starting the information revolution? Was that Gutenberg, Ziegler, or Copernicus? That was Gutenberg. Which city fell, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and establishing the Ottoman Empire as a major world power? Athens, Constantinople, or Alexandria? That was Constantinople. What term describes the transfer of plants, animals, diseases and culture between the New and Old Worlds after 1492? Is that the Mexican, Colombian, or Brazilian exchange? That is the Colombian exchange. Which of the following was not a direct consequence of the Columbian exchange? Rise of the transatlantic slave trade, massive population decline in the Americas, or decline in European wealth? The one that was not, a decline in European wealth. Which explorer reached India by sea in 1498, opening a new trade route? Magellan, Columbus, or da Gama? That was Vasco da Gama. Which of the following was not a direct consequence of Vasco da Gama's new route? Gunpowder introduced to Europe, colonial expansion, or Portugal's economy boosted? The incorrect one there, gunpowder introduced to Europe. Who posted 95 theses on a church door in 1517, leading to religious fragmentation in Europe? Michelangelo, Thomas Hobbes, or Martin Luther? That was Martin Luther. Approximately how many enslaved Africans were transported across the Atlantic during the trade's duration? 12, 7, or 2 million? The answer, an estimated 12 million. Who did the Aztec and Inca empires fall to between 1519 and 1533? French colonists, Portuguese explorers, or Spanish conquistadors? The answer, Spanish conquistadors. Copernicus's work is often cited as marking the beginning of which historical period? The Glorious Revolution, Scientific Revolution, or Renaissance? The answer, the Scientific Revolution. European competition to exploit North American lands and resources began with the Spanish founding where in 1565? Plymouth, St. Augustine, or Jamestown? The answer is St. Augustine or Augustine. Who rose as a major naval power after defeating the Spanish Armada in 1588? Portugal, France, or England? The answer is England. The Peace of Westphalia is historically significant for establishing what principle? Papal authority, divine right of kings, or state sovereignty? The answer, state sovereignty. Who published Principia Mathematica in 1687, laying the foundation for classical physics? Was that Newton, Kepler, or Galilei? That was Isaac Newton. Who implemented major reforms to modernise Russia and westernise it into an empire? Theodore III, Ivan the Terrible, or Peter the Great? That was Peter the Great. Between 1760 and 1830, the Industrial Revolution was largely confined to where? The United States, Great Britain, or Germany? The answer, Great Britain. By formally declaring independence, the American colonies were able to secure an official military alliance with which power to fight Britain? The Netherlands, Spain, or France? The answer is France, which was stormed in 1789, a pivotal moment in the start of the French Revolution. The Bastille, Palace of Versailles, or Notre Dame Cathedral? That was the Bastille. The revolution that created the first modern black republic and inspired anti-slavery movements worldwide was where? Cuba, Jamaica, or Haiti? That was in Haiti. Which series of wars reconfigured Europe and spread legal reforms? The Napoleonic Wars, Franco-Prussian War, or Crimean War? That was the Napoleonic Wars. Which battle marked the final defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte? The Battle of Gravelines, Waterloo, or Trafalgar? That was the Battle of Waterloo. Which diplomatic conference in 1815 redrew the map of Europe after Napoleon's defeat? The Congress of Berlin, the Treaty of Versailles, or the Congress of Vienna? That was the Congress of Vienna. Which year did the British pass the Slavery Abolition Act, outlawing slavery throughout most of its empire? 1815, 1818, or 1833? That was in 1833. Which war forced China to open its ports to foreign trade and cede Hong Kong to Britain, initiating the Century of Humiliation? The White Lotus Rebellion, the Boxer Rebellion, or the First Opium War? That was the First Opium War. Which experienced the Spring of Nations, widespread revolutionary uprisings in 1848? Africa, Europe, or Asia? And they were mostly confined to Europe. What was the main issue that triggered the American Civil War in 1861? Freedom of speech, high taxation of crops, or slavery and states' rights? The answer, slavery and states' rights. Who surrendered on April 9, 1865 in Virginia, effectively ending the American Civil War? Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, or Stonewall Jackson? That was Robert E. Lee. Which war significantly altered European alliances, contributing to tensions that led to World War I? The Spanish-American War, Greek War of Independence, or Franco-Prussian War? That was the Franco-Prussian War. Who was proclaimed the first emperor or Kaiser of the German Empire in 1871? Frederick the Great, Wilhelm I, or Otto von Bismarck? It was Wilhelm I. In which country did the Meiji Restoration take place, initiating rapid modernization? Japan, Korea, or China? That was in Japan. Which canal opened in 1869, boosting international trade and increased the strategic importance of the region? The Kiel, Panama, or Suez Canal? That was the Suez Canal. The Berlin Conference was the climax of the European scramble for where? South America, Africa, or Asia? That was the scramble for Africa. which marked the emergence of the United States as a major power and led to the transfer of the Philippines to US control, the Spanish-American War, the Boxer Rebellion, or the Mexican-American War. That was the Spanish-American War. The Boxer Rebellion was an anti-foreign uprising in which country? China, India, or Japan? That was in China. The Wright brothers' first controlled powered flight in 1903 covered a distance of which? 1.5 miles, 780 feet, or 120 feet? It was just 120 feet. Ethnic tensions in the Balkans and which empire's decline contributed significantly to the outbreak of World War I, the British, German, or Ottoman Empire? That was the decline of the Ottoman Empire. An October 1917 revolution in which country resulted in it withdrawing from World War I? Russia, Italy, or Japan? That was the revolution in Russia. What common name is given to the influenza pandemic that killed an estimated 50 million people? Was that Asian, Spanish, or Russian flu? That was the Spanish flu. Which country was primarily held responsible for World War I and required to pay reparations under the Treaty of Versailles? Russia, France, or Germany? That was Germany. What was Germany's reaction to the terms of the Treaty of Versailles? They ignored them completely, accepted and supported them, or viewed them as excessively harsh? The answer: they viewed them excessively harsh. Which event triggered the Great Depression, transforming global economies? The Wall Street crash, the Treaty of Versailles, or the start of World War II? It was the Wall Street crash. In which country was fascism born before spreading its influence to other European nations? France, Italy, or Germany? That started in Italy. Which conflict began in 1936 and served as a prelude to World War II, testing fascist and Republican forces? The Polish-Soviet War, Spanish Civil War, or the Russian Civil War? That was the Spanish Civil War. Which country invaded China in 1937, marking the start of a full-scale war in East Asia before World War II? Japan, Mongolian People's Republic, or the Soviet Union? The correct one there, Japan. World War II formally began in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland, prompting Great Britain and which other country to declare war on Germany? Italy, the Soviet Union, or France? That was France. Which country was the last country to surrender, ending World War II with its unconditional surrender? Italy, Japan, or Germany? The last was Japan. Which international organisation was founded in 1945 to promote peace and manage the post-war world order? NATO, the League of Nations, or the United Nations? The answer: the United Nations. The Chinese Civil War ended with which party victorious? The Chinese Democratic Party, Nationalist Party, or Communist Party? The answer: the Chinese Communist Party. Which war became the first major hot conflict of the Cold War? The Korean War, the Suez Crisis, or the Vietnam War? The answer: the Korean War. In which spacecraft did Yuri Gagarin complete his historic first orbit of the Earth in 1961? Vostok 1, Luna 11, or Mir? That was in Vostok 1. Which event in 1962 brought the United States and Soviet Union to the brink of nuclear war? The Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia, the Cuban Missile Crisis, or the Berlin Blockade? That was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Apollo 11 moon landing put a nail in the coffin of which country's manned lunar program? China, the Soviet Union, or India? The answer there, the Soviet Union. Which major city fell in 1975, marking the end of the Vietnam War? Da Nang, Hanoi, or Saigon? That was the fall of Saigon. What event marked the symbolic end of the Cold War in November 1989? The Chernobyl disaster, dissolution of Czechoslovakia, or the fall of the Berlin Wall? It was the fall of the Berlin Wall. In which year was the Soviet Union dissolved, leading to the emergence of multiple independent states? 1991, 90, or 89? That was in 1991. So that's my take on events that shaped history. Obviously, there's many more. If you think there's something important that I missed out, share it with us in the comments down below. If you'd like to play more history quizzes, there's a playlist for you here. Or if you'd just like to expand your general knowledge, I've got a playlist for you here. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on another quiz.